For the moment, this is a purely fictional scenario. A swarm of machines, slaughter bots, that can target and kill, all without human intervention.
Even by a hashtag, you can target an evil ideology right where it starts.
Trouble is, the fiction created by activists isn't entirely far-fetched. Far as we know, lethal autonomous weapon systems, or so-called killer robots, have yet to roam any battlefields. But the development of precursors is well underway. So is an international effort to ban them entirely before they become real.
It's very important for all of humanity because if these things are unleashed, I mean, the problems for global security could be enormous.
Put aside for a moment this idea of robots and consider the Samsung Techwind SGR-A1. It patrols the South Korean border and has the ability to autonomously fire if it senses an infiltrator. Right now, it prompts an operator first. Or what about the Russian semi-autonomous T-14 Armata tank? Or the British BAE Systems Taranis, both human-controlled but with semi-autonomous functions. Israel, Russia, the US, and China are all contestants in what's being described as a new global arms race. Some of the prototypes have artificial intelligence. They can learn and get smarter with increasing degrees of autonomy.
5, 4.
The Pentagon has experimented with swarms, drones made to learn to think and react collectively.
Hello, welcome to Sheffield Robotics.
At the University of Sheffield Robotics Lab, swarm technology is still being perfected, not for military use, but for space exploration. Complexity inspired by nature.
So now I start the experiment. So the robots are fully autonomous. They make their own decision.
This drone senses, inspired by the honeybee, could ultimately be useful in disaster zones for search and rescue missions. Without international rules, the team came up with their own ethical manifesto. No negative uses, no collaboration with weapons developers, and that moral responsibility ultimately rests with a human, not the robot.
I mean, even the wheel has positive and negative uses. And I think that's inescapable, but it's our responsibility as scientists to acknowledge and reflect on that, and then try and be advocates for responsible science.
It's why Professor Noel Sharkey, once a robotics professor here, is now also an activist.
You think about swarms of these things, the number of accidental conflicts that could happen, the ease of attacking anywhere in the world, and will wars end? Now, how do you minimize something that's unanticipated?
The ethical and moral questions hotly debated, part of a lecture series on automatons in Halifax last month. His arguments against the risk of malfunction, possible cyber attacks, threats to human dignity. There are also arguments in favor.
It will spare the lives of soldiers. It'll spare the conscience of soldiers. It'll spare soldiers from the threat of suicide. So you can make sure, for instance, that a machine will not kill from fear, anger, lust, revenge, political prejudice, stupidity, confusion, fog of war.
There are other benefits, say advocates, which may be lost with an outright ban. The US, for one, would prefer to work within existing laws of war.
There's no doubt that automation used in the right way could make war more precise and more humane. In fact, we know that we can build machine learning systems today that can identify objects very well and actually beat humans at some benchmark tests for image recognition.
But at a UN meeting this week, and despite what's been described as foot-dragging by some countries, activists are still demanding a ban, one supported by the late scientist Stephen Hawking, Tesla's Elon Musk.
Can we afford incremental movement forward as technology spirals to God knows where?
And Nobel laureate Jody Williams, who inspired the Ottawa Treaty to ban landmines. And the first company to get behind an outright ban was a Canadian one, ClearPath Robotics. The co-founder says lethal autonomous weapons are technically possible now.
Eventually, we will get to some sort of agreement, but whether or not that agreement is in place before these weapons begin to proliferate is an open question.
The sense of urgency and vulnerability is utterly human. Nalayed, CBC News, Sheffield, England.